Joining me now is Herald Sun's Associate Editor James Campbell. James, basically Simon Welsh has been telling us that for the better part of a year, probably even longer, now there is a flurry of activity from the Labor government, Anthony Albanese in particular. And I think probably David Crowe put it best when he said, you know, Anthony Albanese is spending all this money, incremental payments, like he's the Lord Mayor.
Yeah, look, I mean, I sort of disagree with Simon. I think while people might say in focus groups they want a grand narrative, when they're presented with one, they reject it. I think at the last election, what they wanted to see was the back of Scott Morrison. And having achieved that, they had no particular allegiance to this government. You need to remember at all times when you're thinking about the Albanese government that Albanese got a lower percentage primary vote and in fact fewer primary votes than Bill Shorten did. He was not a popular choice for Prime Minister. What we saw was a wide-scale, overwhelming rejection of the Liberal Party. And what has been happening over the last couple of years, much, I will admit to my surprise, is Dutton has detoxified it. If you look at the decline in the other vote over the course of the last couple of years, that other vote, which had left the Liberal Party but didn't quite go to Labor, is now coming back. I think this government is in all sorts of bother. I have thought it's in all sorts of bother for some time. And I don't think that we're going to see some kind of grand narrative emerging between now and May. But let's be honest, it's not like people say, oh, we want it to be like the 1980s when there was this great reformist era. But the difference is, in the 1980s, everybody kind of knew what needed to be done. There was an overwhelming kind of intellectual consensus that, markets, what we call Thatcherism, Reaganism, whatever, was the way to go. And this is much more like the 1970s in that people can see what's wrong, but there's no real consensus about how to fix it. If you look at that period, you had the end of the kind of Keynesian consensus, but there was the new world had not yet been born. The politicians who are operating at this time are like those people. They're stuck in the middle. They don't really know what to do. But let's be frank. I know everyone's unhappy about this government, right? But if you took the label off most of what they've done, aside from the Made in Australia stuff, is it really that different to the last government?
No.
But they were both incrementalists.
I mean, that feels different because we had COVID during the last Morrison term, so anything felt a little bit better after that. But then we've gone full headlong into a cost of living crisis. But the thing here is, if you want to make a little comparison, I don't think you can make too many comparisons with the US, but for a long time, we've spoken about reform. We haven't had a reforming government or the appetite for reform and upsetting people for the better part of a decade, maybe 2 decades here in Australia. But if you want to compare it with the United States, I mean, I think why Trump did so well in the US and is continuing to see, early popularity in Trump's second term is that he's willing to take chances, risks, and he's kind of put aside this type of government that doesn't do anything, who are just managers. I mean, he doesn't always follow through on what he says, but the sentiment is there and he moves things.
Well, he certainly does. I agree with that. But I mean, a lot of the stuff he wants to do is pleasing to the populace, but, they're really, really bad ideas. Like tariffs have been abandoned around most of the world for very good reason, because they make consumers in your own country poorer. Everyone is poorer under tariffs, But they've always been popular. Getting rid of them here was not popular. If someone said they were going to bring tariffs back here, I'm sure they'd win in a landslide. But there's a very good reason why both sides don't do that, which is it's a daft idea. Do we really want... I mean, I guess what I'm saying is everybody says they want some giant new narrative. They want a government that's going to break glass and move quickly. But But when they're presented with governments that do that, they hate it. That's not what they really want. And I mean, where I also disagree with Simon is, although, you know, we all understand that some people are doing it tough and that it hasn't been all sunshine and roses for the last couple of years, Australians need to remember, we're still pretty much the richest people on the planet.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter
once
if
you
you
take
can't,
out your Liechtenstein,
pay your bills, though, does it? Like, the comparison with the rest of the world doesn't really matter.
Well, you shouldn't have borrowed so much money then. That would be my opinion. But what I mean is the...
Okay, but also I think it's a really interesting strategy. Labor's coming out now and saying, well, we've done all of this. Albo, quote unquote, said to Andrew Clennell on the weekend, his government couldn't have done any more. Jim Chalmers today saying, well, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, that is the worst political strategy,
such a bad
isn't
interview.
it?
That was, oh no, man, that was such a bad interview for him. Like everybody at this point wants to hear him admit he's made a mistake. And, you know, Clennell gave him every opportunity to come up with something that he can show to people that, you know, he wouldn't do again. And, you know, instead he got all this nonsense about the Ukrainian war. Like, that was, he's asked what his biggest regret is, and he says, I regret the Ukrainian war. Well, you know, people got a lot of things against Albo, but that's not one that one's not down to him. Right?
Yeah.
It's
Look,
just
we're not blaming
bizarre.
him for Russia invading Ukraine, no.
No, we can get there. Not yet. We can work on it.
There might be someone doing that somewhere, but that's not happening right now.
No, but it showed a guy who hasn't, in my opinion, from what I watch of him, has not yet quite accepted that he needs to move. Like, he can't, if he continues behaving the way he is, if he stands still and we get more of the same, he's going to lose. And, you know, this
so
is
what's the message, James? It's not clear to me
when
from Labor what it is. You know, is it, you know, let us finish the job, give us a second term, because I'm not quite sure what the job is. It would have been way worse. We've done everything we can. We're coming out of the cost of living crisis. Reward us. I'm still not sure what the story is and the message is as to why they deserve a second term. Yeah, I mean, we are doing it pretty well compared to the rest of the world, but why do they need another 3 years? That's what I think they can't quite answer.
I agree with that. And I think part of the problem is that the things that they have done that are medium to longish term aren't really concrete, right? Like Future Made in Australia, we're going to make solar panels here, like fine. But why do I care about that? It's not like the Chifley government announcing we're going to get an FJ Holden that's manufactured here, or, you know, a Hills Hoist that's manufactured here. Like, it's not. It's very difficult to point to something tangible that you're going to feel better about. And let's be frank too. Like, okay, does it really matter when you turn the light on? Do you really care how the electricity is generated? It's not a real promise of a better life. It's just a different way of making something that you already have. And I think Albo's problem is that this, I think, goes to the core of their problem, is that the things they've done don't really make a difference to people's lives. It's not that they haven't done anything. They have done things, but they're just not tangible to the public. And I think they're going to get punished for that. Apart from anything else, aside from the fact that they've sort of decided the Prime Minister is a bit of a wimp, I think. Let's be frank. He doesn't look decisive.
Yeah.
The kind of persona he's crafted over the journey, his political journey, isn't the kind of hard man leader that in these times people seem to be craving.
Yeah. Look, I agree with that. At the beginning of the term, you know, you do get a honeymoon period. I think Albo had the longest honeymoon period in recent history because, you know, after the Morrison years and COVID, people just wanted government out of their lives. I was sick of hearing from them each and every single day. And, you know, Morrison didn't end with the glory that he started, absolutely. And that's true of a lot of prime ministers. But then, certainly people, I think at the start, welcomed that Albo was boring, but he stayed boring for too long. Then they wanted to kind of know what kind of leader he was. And I don't think he either doesn't know himself or he hasn't been able to brandish those credentials because it's not clear to people.
Or is he a guy who's been over-promoted? Like, we shouldn't rule that out.
Perhaps the best way of putting this is that, what's the point of having power? What is the point of his power? What does he want to do with it? Or is it just power for power's sake?
He wants to be there. He's the Chauncey Gardner of politics. He likes to go to things. He likes to be things. I'm not sure he's particularly interested in doing things. He has one great interest. I'll give him that. He loves infrastructure spending. I love the way that a couple of weeks ago, sort of like to get his hand in, get him back on the tools, they sent him around the country to hand out some infrastructure money. That's what he's good at, right? He's an infrastructure minister. He was a good infrastructure minister. But when he was in opposition, he never took any of the harder jobs that required more work, did he? He kept that position until he replaced Bill Shorten. Never asked for Treasury or health or defence or anything that requires real work. He kept the job where you just place Santa to all these people.
Interesting. Santa. Maybe that's something you can run with. Yeah. James, always good to talk to you.
Maybe it is.
We'll see you next week.
Good to talk to you, Laura.